The Bob Murphy Show, episode 456.
There's a tidal wave coming. What you gonna do?
Get ready for another episode of The Bob Murphy Show, the podcast promoting free markets, free minds, and grateful souls. It's your source for commentary and interviews conducted by a Christian and economist. Now here's your host, Bob Murphy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Bob Murphy Show. Today I am speaking with Zach Weissmiller, who is a senior producer at Reason. He's also the co-host with Liz Wolfe of the Just Asking Questions podcast. They've had me on at least twice at this point, so they're very open-minded over there. And what Zach's latest project has been is he did a documentary on what happened with the failed drug decriminalization program in Oregon. And besides a documentary that he put out, via Reason on this topic, Zach also was recently at a Soho Forum debate on this. It was on October 21st is when the Soho debate occurred, on this topic. So that's what we talk about. And I want to just say going into this that this is a great conversation, and I knew Zach would be the right guy for this, where something did not go right, or at least one thing did not go right with the attempted drug decriminalization in Oregon. And so for those of you like me who are radical libertarians and can say, hey, yeah, it's, you can have your ethical views and so forth, and I'm a Christian, and certainly I don't want a bunch of heroin addicts running around. That doesn't help anybody, including them. But I think we need to grapple with what actually happened here, because I know a lot of people who have said, hey, the libertarian, your vision of how stuff is going to play out, look at it's just blown up in your face and you need to face reality. And I don't think everyone who says that is saying it in bad faith, to use that phrase that gets bandied about. All right, I really do think a lot of them are saying, what do you guys look at this? And so we need to grapple with it. And I hope you'll agree. I really drilled down when Zach was saying, his position and trying to analyze it and just make sure, no, wait a minute, but if what you're saying there, so that's what I really do. I've kind of put him through the ringer here. But again, I'm just asking questions. Okay, here we go. My interview with Zach. Zach, welcome to the Bob Murphy Show.
Thanks for having me, Bob. Good to see you.
Nice to see you again. So you have a nice documentary. It's 28-ish minutes over at Reason on how Oregon's drug experiment backfired. And you recently, I guess it was October 21st, were a participant at the Soho Forum where you were talking about this topic, and your opponent was Kevin Sabet.
Mm-hmm.
I said it right. Of SAM, of Smart Approaches to Marijuana. Is that right?
That's right.
Right. So you were arguing in favor of dumb approaches to marijuana, and so that was the resolution.
Exactly, yes.
But it was good. You started off with a low percentage. And so that's the topic. So that's obviously what we're going to talk about here, why I had you here. I'll link to all this stuff, of course, folks, but let Zach kind of give a teaser and just give you the lay of the land. So maybe to you it's commonplace, but for those in the audience who they may have vaguely heard that, oh yeah, Oregon tried something. Can you just explain what the baseline is, what the basic facts, what did they do? And then now what's some more recent news and why are we debating this and so forth?
Sure. So Oregon became the first state to decriminalize all drugs, and they implemented it in early 2021. I made a pair of documentaries, so I actually went there right before they decriminalized it, and then they implemented it and ended up so it was decriminalized by voter initiative. Voters voted for that, and then things did not go as expected or as hoped, and the legislature recriminalized drugs. And so I felt compelled to go back and see, okay, so what exactly happened? Because this is something libertarians have been advocating for decades. And when something like that happens, you need to take a closer look and figure out what went wrong. And so that's what the second documentary is about, is trying to disentangle a bunch of different things that were going on in Oregon, and specifically Portland, which is obviously by far the biggest city at the time.
Okay, and that first documentary, was that via Reason as well, or was that something?
Yes, that was also a Reason.
And that those links are available? Like I can go grab that?
Yes.
Okay, because I
sure
have looked at the second one. I didn't look at the first one. Okay, so we'll obviously folks links all that. Okay, before we get too deep into it, just to be clear, for that first one, you went because you knew that the decriminalization was pending, and you wanted to do a snapshot, like a before and after. Is that, or you happened to just be there and then it was dumb luck?
No, it had just passed, and but it was going to go into effect in the new year.
Gotcha.
And I went to go talk, see, like, okay, so what's the plan here, guys? What are you going to do? This is kind of new, exciting, hopefully successful.
Okay, great. And then another point we should make is what does decriminalization mean? That's not the same thing as legalization, right?
Yes, that's a very important point, because legalization is the ability to sell and buy drugs in a legal market. So like we have with alcohol. Alcohol has been legalized because you can go to the store and buy it under, it's still regulated. You got to be over 21. And so in different states, liquor stores are segregated. So there can be all sorts of regulations, but the key point is you can buy and sell alcohol in a legal market. That is not the case with decriminalization. Decriminalization is where anything having to do with the possession of drugs or the use of drugs is not a criminal matter, but selling drugs is still illegal. And even possessing or using drugs, you can be subject to sanctions, fines, and tickets. We can get a little bit into how different countries have implemented decriminalization, but the fundamental aspect of it is that it is not going to be a criminal matter ever for holding drugs. You're not going to go to jail or prison, and you're not going to have a criminal record for doing drugs.
Okay. Okay, and then so what's interesting, and the reason I was very interested to see that you really did a deep dive on this stuff, coming from what I know is a sympathetic, I'm sure you and I, 95% of talking about this topic would be quite consistent with each other, is that I don't know, 6 months ago at this point, I think, you know what it was? I think it was when the Trump administration was saying how they were gonna, they declared the narco groups in Mexico as a terrorist organization, and clearly opening up the door to military action. And so I think I did a podcast just going through the standard case of, hey, if you really want to stop the drug problem vis-a-vis Mexico, why don't we just legalize stuff and blah, blah. I did my standard econ stuff, and prices would come down, and the cartels, they wouldn't have money to be buying AK-47s because, right. So I did all that. And then some pushback I got was like, yeah, Bob, you know what? I used to believe in all that stuff too, but they tried it in Oregon and it didn't work. All right. And so I really think libertarians need to stop just going from their, ideological playbook and actually open their eyes. And I could tell the guy wasn't, I could tell the guy was earnest. I believed him that he really did used to believe in the case for it. And now I was like, hey, something got screwed up here. So anyway, that's why, like you say, I didn't want to just be like, nope, we're cool. They must, that must not have been real libertarianism. I didn't want to just do that. And so anyway.
Yeah, okay. No, there's a very important point to underline that decriminalization, while it's something that I still believe is an improvement on the status quo, can, if done correctly, which we'll talk about soon, I'm sure, but it cannot solve the problem of the black market and cartels controlling the supply of drugs and so forth, because it does not legalize sales.
Okay, yeah. So that's what one thing I was going to just do as a follow-up. Again, I'll wait until you make your case about Oregon or Portland specifically, but right, that even prima facie, this really isn't. So, testing the idea of, if you wanted to break the backs of the gangs, the drug gangs and stuff, you'd legalize it because of the reasons you're saying. Okay. So can you maybe explain to us though, why is it that people, quote, both sides in this debate stipulate, and certainly you did in the Soho forum, that, what they actually did has been is failure? Would you be okay using that word, that this attempt at decriminalization failed in Oregon?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
on its face, you have to accept that just in the sense that there was a repeal, or the legislature overturned it, and the people of Oregon were supportive of that idea. So it failed in the very basic sense, in that it could not be a sustainable program. So that in
Yeah.
itself is a failure. I also think that it failed to reach its objectives, which decriminalization, as we've already mentioned, is not a way to fight the black market, but it's more of a harm reduction approach. It's a way
Right.
to say, we're going to have to accept that drugs exist and people want them, and that there is a black market in drugs. And this is a way that we can try to make that situation a little less harmful and deadly, and also less concerning for the people that aren't drug users trying to live in a city. And
Right.
on all of those fronts, it did not meet its objectives.
Okay, great. I mean, not great, but thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say, I promise at some point I will let you talk about the specifics here, but I just want to get the framing correct here.
This is good.
Is it right to think that one could make a persuasive case for decriminalization appealing just to pragmatism? In other words, not like saying, oh, people have a natural inborn right to use heroin, but just to say this isn't working, to like lock people up for this stuff and to treat, drug addicts as if they were violent criminals and throw them in prison with a bunch of, rapists and murderers. That's just not working. And so let's try something else, like, giving them clean needles or whatever the thing may be. Okay.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. I think that's the case you really almost have to make, because decriminalization is not some sort of purist libertarian approach to drugs, and it is a very pragmatic, and it involves lots of compromises if you're coming from a libertarian perspective.
Okay, one last preliminary, and then I'm just going to let you rip and take the case however you want to. When you made that first documentary, when you went out there right after it happened and you talked to people and really got the facts on the ground and everything, did you walk away thinking this is going to work, or did you have concerns? Like, let me give you an analogy. So you may remember in popular lore, people will say, oh yeah, things like electricity provision cannot be left to the free market. California years ago tried deregulating it and it did not work. There was rolling blackouts and stuff. And so I get why a Krugman or somebody would say that. But the reason that was annoying is there were people on record, like free market energy economists, who said before they did their quote deregulation, this is stupid, because what happened, folks, is they deregulated the wholesale market, but not the retail market. Yeah. And so they're like, you're clearly going to get shortages, in other words, the wholesalers, the price can skyrocket, but then you're not allowed to sell the homes, at a higher price. And so therefore people will just stop, they just won't do it. Why would you buy at 10 if you can only sell at 8? Right. Yeah. So they'll just stop and wait until the wholesale price comes down. So clearly that's going to be the outcome. So that quote was a failure, but people on the front end said that was going to. So I'm just curious, did you see problems at the front end and think, oh, I don't know, I would have designed this differently?
I was concerned for sure.
Okay.
I spoke with a treatment provider who was, sympathetic to the idea that we don't need to be locking up drug addicts, but he was concerned because his name was Mike Marshall, and he had come out against this because his concern was really that Oregon, the entire idea is that instead of putting people in jail or putting them through the criminal justice system, we're going to divert them into the public health system. And he was pointing out our public health system in Oregon is not very good. We rank 49th or 50th in the nation, and we don't really have much time to set this up. And so that was concerning to me. And then also this was, COVID times, and I saw the tents on the street and so forth. And those two factors combined, I was pretty nervous that this was not going to work as you would hope it would.
Okay. All right. So now, do you want to just say a little bit about like what actually did happen in practice? And
yeah,
let me maybe Kevin Sabit's opening remarks, and I would encourage people, the Soho Forum debate was a good one, that it was very respectful, and it was the kind of thing where each time one of the guys would say stuff and you'd be like, oh yeah, and you kind of lean towards that, and the other guy would get up and say, oh yeah, there's that. And it was like, so it was good in that sense that you guys were like hitting the ball over the net back and forth. And his basic case was, this is, maybe other countries can do things there, they have different cultures or whatever, but Oregon, if it didn't work there, it's not going to work anywhere in the U.S. That they had all these various things in their favor in terms of the voters were behind it. They're very progressive and sympathetic and really wanted to help these people and whatever. So, in terms of decriminalization, where again you're saying the intent is like, hey, maybe we can help these people better by not punishing them, but let's try to help them out and get them out of their addiction and redirect them. Sort of like dealing with a toddler and hey, use your words and instead of just yelling at them or something. That those are the right group of people to have that attitude. And yet, if it blew up there, it's not going to work anywhere. And so now, what do you have to say?
Yeah, that was his case. And I'll just echo what you said in that Kevin Sabet was a very worthy opponent and someone who we actually agree in large part about what more effective and less effective decriminalization looks like, but I fundamentally disagree with his assertion that Oregon, it was sort of the ideal test case. I think that it was in many ways the worst case scenario in terms of rolling this out as a pilot program for the rest of the country to look at. And the most obvious reason for that I've already alluded to, which is that this was COVID times. And so you're trying to shift the entire public health system over to treating, you've got a pretty bad drug addiction and overdose problem. And you're saying now the entire system is going to be oriented towards diverting these people to the public health system. Meanwhile, the public health system is all about making sure everyone's wearing a mask and setting up mobile COVID testing centers and so forth, and kind of focused on that. And then you also remember that we had the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter protests / riots, and Portland happened to be the epicenter of a lot of that action. The whole city was on fire. You had Antifa there. You had the Proud Boys clashing in the streets. You had police precincts set on fire, everyone screaming defund the police. And the legislature actually did cut the police budget as a result of that temporarily. And you had pause on street camping removals. So the tent cities were exploding, and that's where a lot of the open air drug use happened. And so the core of my case, as like the proposition that we were debating at Soho Forum, was, is Oregon compelling evidence that decriminalization cannot work elsewhere? And the one part of my argument here is just all those timing factors. It was kind of the worst possible timing you could imagine for something like this. So and then another part of my argument is just that the kind of progressive governance of Portland and Oregon more generally is, Sabet would say that makes it the ideal place to try something like this. My contention is that these kind of basket case West Coast cities are maybe not the best place to try decriminalization, because the places where it has been tried, in Europe, they do not have this approach whatsoever. They don't have a complete hands-off free-for-all approach, and that if this is going to succeed, then it needs to be paired with taking the complaints of the citizens living in these cities seriously, and having sidewalks that you can walk on, and having parks that the kids can play in, and not allowing kind of an open air drug scene to explode. So that's the overview of my case, but we can talk about the specifics of how that is achieved if you want to.
I do, of course, want to get into that more fully, but let me just make sure I understand like when the average person in Portland says, yeah, I was even for it when they tried this back in 2021. And, but yeah, I have to admit it didn't work. And I'm glad that the legislature recriminalized it.
Mhm.
What specifically are they, is it like the amount of addicts just strewn about the sidewalk that I have to step over on the way to work went up? Is that what they mean? Or like muggings went up, or what, what do they have in mind, or all the above?
Yeah. Well, so one thing is, yes, the visible disorder of, there's a downtown Portland. I don't know if you've been or not, Bob, but
I was before COVID. I've been at least, I think, twice.
I mean, yeah. So I went before COVID, and it was not so bad. But the two times I've gone, kind of during COVID and then post COVID, there's several square blocks of the downtown area that are just, it's what you see in San Francisco, and Skid Row. It's not quite as bad as Skid Row in LA, but it's the same idea, and people just justifiably so are very uncomfortable seeing that unfolding in their city. I went to a local business where he's like, I'm hiring baristas, but they almost need a master's in social work to work here now. And it's just not right to expect your employees to have to come in and deal with that on a day-to-day basis. So that's one aspect of it. And then, there was before decriminalization went into effect, actually, there was a crime spike happening in in Portland, because of kind of the general unrest happening in the streets. So I think in a lot of people's minds, it all just kind of blended together: decriminalization, riots, businesses being looted. Like it all is in. It's kind of understandable. People were just like, we don't want any of that. Right. So let's move forward and have a more let's just bring order back to the city.
Okay, fair enough. So I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but your debating opponent brought up some statistics in his opening, presentation or whatever, remarks about property crime up, blah, 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 and this up. Yeah. So presumably those statistics are correct, but would you say, again, your point is this is kind of a bad way to test the implications of this one policy change, because this all happened in the midst of Black Lives Matter protests and police stand downs and blah, blah, blah?
Exactly. Yeah. Those statistics were going up in many cities in this era, especially on the West Coast. And yeah, I don't think that he makes a strong case that this is directly attributable to decriminalization per se. The main thing that went up, the biggest kind of failure of decriminalization in Oregon is the fact that overdoses did not go down. That is really a sort of the point of it, because you're supposed to be making the supply safer, getting people into treatment, and that did not happen. You also can't say that decriminalization made the overdoses go up. I showed a graph in my debate, and I can send you the link to this, but the overdoses were going up 2 years before decriminalization went into effect, because fentanyl is the number one driver of overdose deaths, and that was sweeping across the nation. And you can really just track the movement of fentanyl with the overdose rates across the country. And kind of like a real easy way to look at it is to see that the decriminalization didn't really have much of an effect on that. Either way is that Washington State, right above Oregon, briefly decriminalized just for like a month or two, and we're like, oh, never mind. And then after they recriminalized, their overdose rates kept going up at the same rate. So it's my belief that it just didn't have an effect either way, which is not good for decriminalization either.
Right. Okay. So as far as the people saying, "Hey, this is intolerable. We got to clean this up, recriminalize it." I mean, is it just as basic as so some guys, you're trying to go to work to serve coffee to people in your Starbucks or something, and there's 8 guys just kind of laying out on the sidewalk, their legs, leaning over, and you got to kind of walk around them. And so someone just calls the cops, and they come and just arrest those guys and get them out of there, and that's the solution.
That would be so. This is the kind of frustrating thing about it is that the police should be able to do that whether or not drugs
I mean, that's kind of that's where I'm going with the question.
Yeah,
but I'm
exactly.
saying, so from the Kevin's perspective, or just the average person living there, the business owner who's like, I feel bad for these people, but this just can't work. I can't run a business like this. So I'm saying, how does recriminalization, quote, solve that particular element of the problem? Is it just the police show up, and if these guys are clearly in possession of or have it in their veins or something, they are allowed to arrest them, whereas before they wouldn't, because it's not illegal to have whatever on you.
It really doesn't solve the problem. I think that it's just in the average citizen's mind. It's all just kind of blends together. And that problem, by the way, still has not been solved. When I went there after recriminalization and I visited this business, you'll see in the documentary, there was a campsite right next to this guy's business with like smoke coming out of it. And they just don't do anything about it. So that's an ongoing problem for Portland. The biggest thing that it changed from a law enforcement perspective, I did a ride along with a police officer who covers that downtown area, and one of his complaints about decriminalization is that it's very hard to catch a drug deal in progress. So remember, decriminalization still prohibits drug dealing.
Right.
And if they can arrest someone that they suspect of being a drug dealer for possession, it kind of makes his job easier. So that is the police perspective on things. Is it's just easier if I can pick up someone just for having drugs on them and don't have to catch them in the act. They did kind of adapt to it and learned how to surveil better and catch drug deals. He was actually a bike cop, and it's easier if you're a bike cop and you can just like silently roll up on someone and catch them in a drug deal. But yeah.
Okay, so I guess that ties into, because I think that was part of what Kevin's point was, if I'm not misremembering, that he was saying. Am I right that he would say, like, this isn't mere decriminalization of possession, that in de facto, when they do this kind of thing, they're not locking people up for drug dealing anymore? Or did I misunderstand what he was saying?
He might have been saying that it's fairly rare to be imprisoned for simple drug possession, that usually, and in Oregon, there was no state level prisoner who was at the time in prison for just drug possession or drug use. Although that ignores jails, which are local. And so the kind of status quo of criminalization is basically drug users kind of like bounce in and out of jail. And then that's a particularly dangerous moment for a drug addict, actually, is because they will go to jail and kind of dry out for a couple of days and then go out into the street and then use the same amount of drugs. And then that's when the overdoses happen. And so that's partly what decriminalization is trying to interrupt and say, it would be better if that person, instead of that kind of pointless cycle, gets pushed into a treatment program at that time.
Hey, folks, let's take a break from the action to hear this important announcement. I want to let you folks know that I now have a recurring economics column at the New American magazine, and they come out with both a digital version and a print copy if you pine for the days when you used to get stuff in the mail and you'd sit down with your coffee and read something that's actually physical and you can hold it in your hands. And so that's what they offer. So I would recommend that you check it out. If that sounds like something that would be interesting to you, go to thenewamerican.com/subscribe. And it's just one last little teaser. The current issue has my analysis of the difficulties facing Argentina President Milei and why he's having such issues. As I record this ad, they're having their midterm election where his agenda might be at stake. And so that's what I cover in the current issue. If you go ahead and subscribe right now. So again, go to thenewamerican.com/subscribe and get your hands on my recurring monthly column on economics. Okay, let's get back to the show. Okay, let me just go back to something you said a minute ago, because right now I'm trying to understand exactly what your position is.
Okay.
Because at first I thought you were saying, yes, the way, like there were a lot of confounding factors and this really wasn't a fair test case, but I thought you were saying even on its own terms, the way they went about this was not a good test of this, and that like it wouldn't have shocked me that it would have blown up in their face even without Black Lives Matter and COVID and so forth.
That is true. There were other factors beyond COVID and Black Lives Matter that would have made Oregon not the ideal test case. Mm-hmm. But do you want me to talk about those?
I do, but I just wanted, but on the narrow question of like, in terms of like the average person, like why would in their mind when they say this isn't working is because like, just streets flooded with addicts and things. And so but then it sounded like you were saying, that recriminalization also is not that you don't think they're going to come and just arrest those guys anyway. Right. So that's what I'm just trying to understand. Like, do you think recriminalization is at least solving one particular symptom of the overall issue? And that some people could say, all right, yeah, I know we still haven't gotten to the root of the problem here, but at least, issue X now is slightly better? Or are you saying no even on their own terms?
I don't think recriminalization is really solving many of Portland's problems. Some things have started to improve just as the mere fact that we're not in the middle of a pandemic anymore.
Here's how I want to ask it, just to isolate, to get the heart of what my question to you. I'm not trying to trap you. I'm just generally trying to understand what your position is.
Sure.
So back to my electricity example, there's two possible things that a libertarian could say. They could say, yes, given that that the California Regulatory Commission, or whatever the heck they were called, was going to do was they were going to keep electricity sold to households, regulated price controls. And then they were toying with the idea of let's deregulate the wholesale market. Given that that's what they're going to do, I would say, no, that's a bad idea. And if they just deregulate the wholesale market, now all of a sudden there's rolling blackouts, we as libertarians would say, don't do that. If you're not willing to deregulate the retail, then go back and reimpose price controls in the wholesale, and at least that'll eliminate the blackout problem. Yes, the whole thing privatized would be better still, but if you're not willing to do that, have the other shoe drop, then no. Versus another libertarian might just say, well, yeah, it's better than nothing. Yeah, go ahead and deregulate. A little deregulation is better than none. But if you really wanted to get the full benefits, you would do a complete. So those are two separate ways of dealing with it. And I'm wondering, what are you saying here, that what Portland did was better than this old status quo, and the reason it might look like it failed was because of a bunch of things that swamped the result? Or are you saying, yeah, what they tried to do actually was not a good idea and they should have done it differently?
I see. Okay. So this might relate to the best way to answer that might be to talk a little bit about how other countries have done decriminalization.
Yep.
Because part of the problem for Oregon, and I'm going to continue to focus on Portland because that's what I'm most familiar with, and it's I think most important part of this story, because that's where the most visible problems cause the backlash and the reversal, I think. So when you become the first state in the country to decriminalize, it's not just about the policy, it's about the signal that you send, because now you can either send the signal that, all right, we're open for business and you can come here and do drugs in the streets and nothing's going to happen to you. And I think that signal did go out to some degree. And Portugal, by contrast, as the first country to do this in Europe, also was aware that this is a danger, that we're the first country to decriminalize drugs. So now all of Europe might think, okay, you can come to Portugal to party, and we do not want that. So they intentionally...
You don't want French people showing up.
They intentionally paired it with a kind of cleanup process. They had a huge open air drug scene that's in Portuguese known as like the supermarket of drugs was the nickname for it. And they
That
went
didn't
in
sound
there.
like it was in Portuguese.
They cleaned it up. They kind of surged their police to problem areas and sent that signal as they were doing this, that this is actually an effort to alleviate the public disorder problem, not kind of pour gasoline on the fire.
Right.
And so that is, I guess, that would be my answer to the question, I guess, is that, I think it made things worse to do decriminalization in a way where you were not also consciously taking care of these other problems, because then even the things that decriminalization you can't directly blame on it are going to get blamed on it, and also so it's better, it's going to be more sustainable, and it's going to be better for the people of Oregon and of Portland to do those things in tandem. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so now let me throw the real tricky one. It's interesting because I've been jotting down, some of your responses. So suppose I'm an anti-libertarian guy, like a right winger, conservative type. I'm going to say, well, geez, according to Reason's own guy, the problem with decriminalizing drugs is that they already had a very strained public health system, so they couldn't redirect a bunch of, government efforts and resources towards, dealing with this issue. And the police were also not, doing enough. And so it looks like in order for libertarianism to work, you need strong government. And that, the reason this partial rollback didn't work is because the government, we didn't have enough government budget for healthcare and police enforcement. So isn't that like, what else do you need to know that libertarianism doesn't work?
Yeah. Well, I would just say that decriminalization is not a purely libertarian solution to the problem. That would be legalization. But decriminalization is, I see as a change to the sort of, in the best case scenario, it's just a more pragmatic change to the status quo. So you're spending this money and these resources one way or another. It's either to use law enforcement to take care of the problem and not really take care of the problem, given that these problems existed before decriminalization, or you're saying we're going to shift those resources to something else that works, that might have a chance of working better. And then if that works, then maybe people, if you're a libertarian thinking about this in kind of step by step, if decriminalization works and proves itself out to people, maybe people will be more open to the conversation around legalization. I've been challenged on that. And I think there's a legitimate challenge to that, like from libertarians who are like, it all has to happen at once. Decriminalization is this half measure. And unless you do full legalization, it's not even worth it. I don't think that's the case, just because I've seen the results in other countries. And so I think it can be kind of a step in the right direction, but I certainly can see that it is not going to solve all the problems. I just think done correctly, it can be an improvement on what we have now, both from like a purely results standpoint, a justice standpoint in terms of not jailing people for what I see as victimless crimes, and a resource like taxpayer standpoint, like what are the tax dollars actually going towards?
Okay, I got a good hypothetical for you. And again, Zach, you know me enough to know I'm not trying to zing you or something here, but I think this is interesting for the listeners to think through too, and just figure out where they stand. Suppose there's some city somewhere in the U.S., not on the West Coast, but it's a big city and they have social issues and blah, blah, blah. And they're just, for whatever reason, the Bob Murphy show is awesome. And everybody's just loving it. And they're doing ballot measures and initiatives and things. And so there's three things that are coming up and that they're all going to vote on. And one is going to decriminalize all drugs. The second one is they're going to slash government spending on health measures by 50% and just do a tax cut, to give that money back to the people. And the third is they're also going to slash the police budget 50%, again, and, give that money back to the taxpayers. And they're going to tell, the health people focus on, like, do triage, like, meaning given you now have half the budget you did before, focus on people that are, like, really on their deathbed and want to focus on that, and tell the police, don't do stupid stuff like giving people traffic to, no, you got half the budget now, so you got to lay some cops off and whatever, and just focus on violent criminals. And that's, like, really what you should focus on. Are you saying you would say that's a bad idea, guys? If you're going to do the decriminalization, don't cut the other two budgets right now. Wait and do that down the road.
Is so in this hypothetical city, do we have tent encampments everywhere? Is there already rampant disorder, or are things pretty much under control in that regard?
I don't know. If you want to say your answer depends on that, just tell me how you would.
My answer does depend on that, because I think that if you're
does it matter what color the tents are?
Yeah, I think if you're starting,
what if it's raining?
I think if you're starting from a place where the situation's already spiraled out of control and you don't have, like, a realistic plan to take care of that at the same time, it's just not going to work. So it's not something I'd be particularly supportive of. I think that, interestingly, like, I don't even know if ballot initiatives are the right way to do this or not, but like, what's happening in Oregon right now might be a path forward, because they have technically recriminalized drugs, but in the background, they're doing this program called diversion, where the police, when they pick up someone who's a drug user causing some sort of public issue, they're encouraged to not book them and arrest them, but to take them to a deflection center. Sorry, it's called deflection, not diversion. And they're kind of slowly under the radar now doing the work of building up the treatment system and creating this pipeline. This is what Portugal did, by the way. They kind of did a soft decriminalization where it wasn't official, but the stance of the government was, we want to start thinking about ways not to criminalize people for doing drugs because it's not working very well. So they did that in 1998. The conversations had started back as far back as 1993. And then by the time they decriminalized formally in 2001, they had it all built out and the system was sort of already oriented towards that. And so that's what I would say is, like, some of that work being done already makes it a more promising endeavor. Like one place that I always think about, I don't know how our libertarian friends in New Hampshire would think about this, but, like, New Hampshire, for instance, has already they had a pretty bad problem with drugs, but they've already started building out their treatment system, and last year was, like, their largest year-over-year decrease in overdose deaths. And we know they've got some libertarian sensibilities there. Maybe they would have the right pairing of, like, we're not going to allow kind of complete obliteration of property rights as we're implementing this, and we've done the work of building out a more robust treatment system. That's the kind of situation that I think has a higher chance of success.
Okay, good stuff. And by the way, just to be clear, like, to you, Zach, but also the listeners, I don't think that that's some sort of fatal flaw in libertarianism if there are scenarios where you would say you can't just do, this thing, or the sequence in which you roll back the state is important. And the example I think that best illustrates this that I've come up with is, am I against the government giving free food to people as a general rule? Yes, I'm against it. It should be private charities and blah, blah, blah. Oh, yep, I'm against that. Okay, so, and are you against, like, mass incarceration? Yep, I'm against that too. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have the government stop giving food to the people that are in prison, but we're still going to keep them in prison. That's what you support, right? That's better than nothing, Murphy. And I would say, no, if you're not going to let them out of the prison cells, you got to keep feeding them with taxpayer funding. Right. And I don't think that I just blew up libertarianism by me saying that. Right. That, for him, it's all or nothing. And like, no, that's goofy. Right. So, yes,
order of operations does matter sometimes.
So I can certainly see in these sorts of things that, the order could matter, and you're not thereby admitting that your philosophy is flawed or something. Okay. I guess I got one more for you. We keep contrasting decriminalization with legalization and so on. Is there any sense in which you think some of these problems with decriminalization that you're talking about and how, well, geez, that goes into this, and then, if you wanted to do that, you could, do these other things and to buttress it, and that would be better. Is there any sense in which, and I'm asking because I actually don't see how you would, it doesn't seem to me any of the issues you've brought up about what happened and what went wrong is because, they didn't go the full way and totally legalize it. Am I wrong in that? Like, do you think, no, actually, if they had just done full-blown legalization, it would have been better than just the decrim?
Yeah, I mean, I think it actually is possible that full-blown legalization would be better than decriminalization. The problem is just a purely political one, not a philosophical one. I think it's that people don't like it's a hard, like, imagining people voting to legalize commercial heroin sales.
But here's what I mean.
Yeah.
Just to make sure you get my point. That you've explained why, as of 2020, it was both illegal and criminalized, the possession. And then 2021, they decriminalized it. And you explained why that didn't work. Yeah. And I'm saying every single thing you brought up as to why that failed, I'm not seeing how, if they instead had legalized it, would have helped on any one of those issues. Like, you weren't saying there were still drive-by shootings and kids getting hit by stray bullets. If you'd said that, then I'd say, that's because they only decriminalized. If they had legalized it, then that... But you didn't, as far as I can see, say anything that legalization would have helped that particular thing that you're saying that's why decrim failed, at least politically.
The only thing that I could imagine it helping with in this scenario, let's imagine this world where that was possible, then is that the supply would almost instantly have become safer, and so it may have reduced overdose deaths, because now you could go in and know that you're not getting you know your exact dose. The marijuana legalization is a really good way to understand this. For if you have any listeners who've ever gone into a dispensary or anything, you go in.
I'm sure none of them have.
Yeah. You've everything's labeled. It's very corporate now. You can get gummies that are like, you're getting your 5 milligrams of THC, and it doesn't have fentanyl dusted on top of it or something like that. And the states that have done this well, like Colorado, it's like 80% of their market now is produced legally. California, even after legalizing, they're just now getting over 50% of their marijuana is produced like above board.
Is that because they tax it or something? Like, why?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like their harvest tax is so crazy that and they already had these huge black market operations up in Northern California. So it's hard to compete with that. And then just the licensing of the dispensaries, and the dispensaries are the unlicensed dispensaries are trying to keep their overhead low, so they're happy to buy the black market weed and so forth.
Okay. All right. That makes okay. So good answer. I'm glad. Like, by this point in the interview, I was wondering, like, am I making the case for not legalizing drug? Okay. So great answer. Clearly, that's a very straightforward argument as to why full-blown legalization would at least reduce. Can we actually? I had one more for you. Can you explain when people talk about like fentanyl overdoses? Like, when I was younger, to me, overdose meant you accidentally took too much of it, and like Dr. David Banner had an accidental overdose of gamma radiation, and there he set the dial to one thing and it was wrong, and so that doesn't actually. What does it mean when you say, he OD'd on fentanyl? Does that mean they didn't know it was it? They were taking something else, or like, can you just explain what do we mean when we talk like that?
No, it just means that you took an amount sufficient to cause like a near death experience or die. Overdose deaths is what I'm talking about, really, and that's extremely easy to happen on fentanyl. And this is a point that I was, always I'm trying to underscore, is that the very fact that fentanyl exists as a street drug is a byproduct of prohibition. One of my previous documentaries in this realm was about pain patients who basically they were getting their pain pills like cut off because of the opioid problem. They got so strict on the pain pills that legit chronic pain patients like couldn't get their medication. But you can, in reporting that, I saw the data that you really can draw a pretty direct line of like, people got hooked on the pain pills. They cracked down on the pain pills. The interest in heroin suddenly went up. Then the cartels pivoted to fentanyl because it's just way easier to get over the border. And now, Trump, as you mentioned at the beginning, is bombing the boats and going to war with the cartels. And the cartels are starting to back off fentanyl, but it's just a synthetic opioid. So they're just synthesizing new alternatives to fentanyl that, believe it or not, are even worse. There's one that creates these deadly ulcers in your body. So the next nightmare is coming, and it only keeps evolving in this whack-a-mole situation. And that's why I continue to believe in things like decriminalization and ultimately legalization as a concept, because it clearly doesn't work, and it's brought us to this point where people are, that fentanyl exists as a street drug. The status quo is what has brought us to that.
Okay. So thank you for that. But let me just, again, and this is probably just my own ignorance on this. If some guy tragically dies and they say, he had OD'd on fentanyl, did that guy set out that night to have some fentanyl or ingest? I don't know what verb you would use. Take some.
I see what you're saying.
And then he just miscalibrated, or he thought what he was taking in was a such an amount, but because it was wasn't labeled, or is it he thought he was taking something else and there was fentanyl in it and he didn't even know? Yeah, that's the kind of thing, or possibly any of those.
Yeah, both of those things can happen. So, when a lot of this sad stories where it's some teenager overdosing on fentanyl who's not a fentanyl addict, they just got something they bought something online or got it at a party and it's laced with fentanyl. So it's in the drug supply now, it's made it much more dangerous. And then, yes, there are actual fentanyl addicts on the streets now. And, they've built up a tolerance to fentanyl, but then if they take too much, or this scenario I outlined before where they kind of lower their tolerance and then take the same amount, then they can die of an overdose. Okay.
This is truly the last one.
Sure.
That one, because I've heard people say that too, that, you get something that's late. I don't get what's going on there. Is it kind of warning, if you have a peanut allergy, everything we uses equipment and there might be some peanut dust on it, and just, hey, you're a drug dealer and you're packing stuff together in the back room somewhere and some fentanyl dust accidentally, or you intentionally do that to give it more of a kick or something?
Yeah, it's mostly the latter is my understanding.
Okay. All right. Well, and I guess you agree that blowing up boats that are 1,100 miles away probably is not the way to solve that problem?
I don't think so. I think that, if people are trying to get ecstasy or something like that, then maybe a better solution would be to sort of have an avenue where they. I
thought you were going to say, listen to the Bob Murphy show. I was would have cut. That would have been a great closing.
Where they know that they're getting what they're looking for.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you so much, folks. My guest has been Zach Weissmuller and Of Reason. And he's got 2 documentaries are good, and also his recent debate at the Soho Forum, which was very good in terms of going back and forth and just making sure Zach was being kept honest by his debate opponent. So I highly recommend all 3. Well, I technically can't vouch for the first documentary. I assume it was you didn't have an off day when you made that one. So thanks, Zach, so much for your time coming here and explaining some of this difficult problem.
Thanks, Bob. I really appreciate it.
And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. See you next time.
You've just experienced another episode of The Bob Murphy Show. the podcast promoting free markets, free minds, and grateful souls. For more information and to subscribe to this podcast, visit bobmurphyshow.com.